In a previous lesson, I demonstrated how to use Classic Tweens along with frame-by-frame animation to create your fish swimming along 4 different paths in the Aquarium project. I want to revisit that and show you how to do the same thing but use Motion Tweens instead of Classic Tweens. So previously when we did this, we had our fish following a path with a guide layer across one path and then using some frame-by-frame animation to turn the fish. We had it follow another path, did a frame-by-frame animation to turn it back around again, and this time follow a third path, once again doing a frame-by-frame animation, and then finally following and then again a frame-by-frame animation, turn the fish around, and we're back to where we started in frame 1, and the scene loops endlessly. So we used Classic Tweens in doing that. What I'm going to do is simply delete both these layers, leaving just the background of our aquarium. We go back to frame 1, and let's create a new layer. I'm going to name this fish. And from my library, I'm going to grab the fish profile and bring it into our aquarium. That's a little bit big, so I'm going to scale it down. I'm going to go ahead and remove all of these frames using a shift click, remove frames. So I'm back down to just my one frame. And now I'm going to right click on the object and choose Create Motion Tween. My animation is set for 12 frames per second. I want this to take about 40 to 45 frames to get to the other side of the aquarium. Let's just do 45. And so this now is a motion tween. So on this last frame of this tween, I want my fish to end up down about here. And somewhere along the way, I might have it make a few adjustments along its path. And so now we can see the animation of this fish swimming along. Now at this point, I want to turn the fish around. I'm going to use a frame-by-frame animation to do that. And I find it easier to do another frame or another layer. And I'm going to call it Fish FXF for frame-by-frame. And on this layer, I'm going to insert a keyframe. I'm going to take my fish profile, bring it in, and let's size it down. I basically want to make it the same size as my fish that I did the motion tween on. Roughly going to start in the same position. And I might want to have it sit there for a few frames. Then I'm going to insert a keyframe. I'm going to select my fish, and I'm going to swap it. This time for the fish 45. It'll be there for just a couple frames. Insert a keyframe. Select my fish. Swap it for fish front. Might let it sit there for a few frames. Insert a keyframe, swap it again for fish 45, and now I'm going to go to the Modify menu and choose Transform, and I want to flip it horizontally. So it's now facing the other direction. Again, go out a couple frames, and let's have it go 2 frames. I'm going to insert a keyframe, and once again, I'm going to select this and swap it, this time for fish profile. Now I'm going to remove all these extra frames that I have in my timeline. So I'm using shift click and then right click and remove frames. So there's my frame by frame animation. Let me just scrub through this. Fish swims down, turns, And now I want to have him swim back another path. I'm going to bring him down over here. So again, I'll use a motion tween to do that. So my fish layer, I'm going to go to the frame just behind where my animation ended with the motion tween, and I'm going to insert a blank keyframe. Then I'm going to come back and insert a blank keyframe past my frame by frame animation. And from the library, I'm going to bring in fish profile. I'm going to flip it horizontally and scale it down. Now I want to get this basically lined up with the fish where it's ending in terms of the frame by frame. I'm just going to hide this layer for now. Lock it and hide it. And I'm going to extend this down. Actually, what I can do is just go to my keyframe here, and I'll use my ruler guides. So I can get the position of where this fish should be. All I really need is 3 ruler guides. I can hide that layer, show and unlock the fish layer. So in the fish layer, on my new keyframe, I'm going to position the rotation point in the upper left hand corner. That'll allow me to scale this a little bit easier. In that I'm going to simply move the fish so it's hitting those ruler guides, and then I'm going to hold down the shift key and grab this bottom corner and just scale it towards basically going to match. Okay, so there's my new fish. Let's move the rotation point back to the center. And now I'm going to add a motion tween. Now because I have an animation or motion tween earlier on this layer, it only gave me a 1 frame motion tween. I'm going to grab this frame and just extend it out. I want this to come out to about frame 100. And with the playhead on that last frame of this motion tween, I'm going to move it to where I want it. I'm going to take the selection tool. I'm going to grab the path and just basically arc it. So now my fish follows this path. And if I want, I could bring the fish up a little bit here. And maybe here I want to bring it down a little bit. And so there's my new path. Now I'm going to do a frame by frame, same way I did up on the previous one. I'm going to insert a blank keyframe. Bring my fish profile up, so I need to unlock that frame. View it. So I'm going to bring fish profile. And I don't want my fish continuing here in the frame by frame animation. I want to make sure I insert a blank keyframe there. And so we have our fish profile. We're going to take this fish, transform it, flipping it horizontally. And if I wanted, I can come over to the properties and look at the size of my fish. It's 104 pixels wide and 70 pixels high. So I can click this fish, and I can basically type in 104 and 70. That's going to give me pretty much the exact same size. Move this fish into place. And I'm going to insert a blank keyframe on our fish layer. And then on the frame by frame, I want to have the fish turn around. Insert a keyframe. Select my fish. Swap it. Fish 45. Insert a keyframe, a couple frames over. Select the fish. Swap it for front. Insert a keyframe, a few frames over. Swap the fish back for fish 45. Now I want to transform it by flipping it horizontally. And then finally, a couple more frames, insert a keyframe, or swap it for fish profile. Okay, so I'm going to select this fish, I'm going to copy it, come down to the fish layer, insert a blank keyframe. As I copied that fish, I can go to the edit menu and choose paste in place. That's another way of getting the fish in the exact same location without using ruler guides this time. Actually, probably a little faster way of doing it. And I'm going to right click, create a motion tween. And again, I need to extend this out however many frames I want the fish to swim this time. Let's go out to about 155. Have the fish come up to maybe about there. I'm going to arc my path. Just modifying the position of the fish a little bit. So he now swims along that path. And once again, I need to do a frame by frame animation. So I'm going to right click, insert a blank keyframe. Actually, let's do one other thing. On this frame here, let's give this fish a little bit more depth. And I'm going to have the fish swim behind the plant, look like it's getting further behind. So I'm going to bring up my motion editor, and I'm positioned this over on the side where you can't see it, but you'll see what I'm doing. So I'm going to change actually the scale X and scale Y. So let's see, if I can roll this up actually. Let me do this. I'm going to bring this down. Hope you can still see the fish there. So I'm going to scale this down a little bit from 35%. Let's take it down to maybe 28% and 28%. Scaling the same amount in both directions. So now as the fish swims to the right, it's going to get a little bit smaller. It's swimming further back in the tank. Now we need to rotate it, or turn it around. So I'm going to insert a keyframe, which I'm going to sort of blank keyframe here, and then insert a blank keyframe on this next frame after my animation. I'm going to go to the library, bring in fish profile, scale it down, and I'm going to remove one frame out of here so that these are overlapping, and scale this down just a little bit so it's roughly the same size, same position. Doesn't look perfect because the fish could move just a little bit from frame to frame. I'm going to come back in here, insert a frame. And so now my frame by frame animation will start on the frame after the motion tween ends. Let's insert a keyframe and let's swap for fish 45. I'm going to insert another keyframe, swap for fish front, insert another keyframe, and go over a few frames. This time I'm going to swap for fish 45. And I want to transform it by flipping it horizontally. And then finally we'll go to fish profile, insert a keyframe, select the fish, swap it for fish profile. Okay, so I need to have the fish swim back to where it started and have it grow in size at the end. So I'm going to select this fish, come down to my fish motion tween layer, insert a keyframe, and paste in place. Right click on the fish, create a motion tween, can bring this down a few frames, and I'm going to extend my aquarium background down. On this last frame of the motion tween, I'm going to move my fish back over here, and I'll bring up that motion editor again. So I'm going to scale the fish back up to, this time I'm use a minus 35 because it's facing the other direction. And 35% scaling in the Y. And so it will grow larger there. And again, I'm going to modify the path a little bit. Now, one thing I do need to do is make sure the fish ends up in the same position. So let me go back to my very first frame. And let's create some ruler guides for where this fish should be. So you should end up there. And I noticed that looking motion editor is 36% is where it started. So I'm going to come back over to here. So on this last frame, let's make this minus 36 and 36. It's actually 36.1, but that'll be close enough. And it looks like I did a pretty good job of getting this to where it needs to be in terms of its position. I'm just going to nudge it a little bit, using the cursor arrows to do that, get that in place. And now I'm ready to do another frame by frame animation, just to turn this thing around. So I'm going to insert a keyframe. Let's just go to the end of our last frame by frame animation, insert a blank keyframe, and then insert a blank keyframe where the animation, tween animation ends. And I could actually come over and select, and get rid of my motion editor again. I'm going to select this fish, copy, come back over here, going to paste. I'm just going to paste in center, going to move it over here to the position and flip it horizontally. I'm going to nudge it in place. Close enough. I'm going to insert another frame. That brings it out to the frame past my animation. I'm just going to go to the very next frame, insert a keyframe, and let's swap the fish. Fish 45. Let it sit there for a few frames. Insert a keyframe. Swap the fish for the front view. Insert a keyframe. Swap it for the 45, and I'm going to flip it horizontally. And then finally insert a keyframe and flip this one for the profile. And now I should be back in the exact same location where I started on the first frame. I need to extend the aquarium background down a few frames. And now let's test the movie. and it loops seamlessly.